Hello and welcome to the Knowing Self, Knowing Others podcast, where we talk about self-aware leadership with thinkers from around the globe. Join me, your host, Nia Thomas, as we talk to today's guest. A very big welcome to Daniel Astarita, the Managing Director of Kesslers International and Proportion London. They are renowned names in the retail design industry. Daniel has over a decade of dedicated leadership experience, and he's overseen the creation of numerous award-winning displays for retailers and brands worldwide. Daniel's leadership extends beyond business success. He's deeply vested in nurturing a culture of creativity, problem solving, and continuous improvement within his team. The ethos that he has really ensures that Kesslers consistently exceeds client expectations and maintains that long-term partnership with some of the industry's biggest names, which you really want when you work in retail. In January 2022, Daniel led Kesslers through a merger with a large corporate entity, and he's going to talk to us more about the challenges and the successes of that transition. But join us as we delve into Daniel's leadership journey, his passion for excellence, and the inspiring future he envisages for his team. Welcome, Daniel. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you so much for that introduction. That was quite the introduction. I am very grateful for you to have me, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Brilliant. So tell us about your journey to your position, because you're managing director of two companies, which, I mean, that's no mean feat if you've got to, eat and sleep in between as well. So how does all of that fit together?
So I guess it came around by accident, is the honest truth. So the business that I worked in as a sales director for 10 years hit rocky grounds, and it actually went into administration. The administrators came in to close the business down. And I'd watched the business struggle for the last 2 years, and I had ideas, I had ways that I wanted to improve it, but I wasn't able to land them with the old ownership. I wasn't able to get across what I wanted to get across to try and make the business better. I was the youngest director of 6, and I guess I was probably on the board almost by default because of a role in sales. So when everyone else had left, I sort of said to the administrators, look, I think I can do this better, and I'd like to purchase the assets. I'd like to purchase the IP because I want to kick the business off again. And basically, it all happened, and it took a bit of a chance. But the plan was to strip the business back to its basics. The business has been around for 130 years and have been successful for 128. And we lost our way for 2 years. And I kind of always believed that at its root core, at the heart of the business, was something that was still potentially very successful. So I sat down. It was December the 14th after we made 180 people redundant. It was the saddest day of my life. It was absolutely awful. And created a new business plan. I worked Christmas Day, Boxing Day, and we brought the business back on January 16th, 2022. And we've been trading now as this old name but new business for getting on for 2.5 years. And it's going well, but I'm on a learning curve. I've come from being a sales director, which is a completely different role, to being an MD. Completely different. All the responsibilities change, and so I'm on this absolute self journey, really, to try and be the most rounded leader that I can be.
You said that you were on the board by default because you were in a sales role. So how did you get to that sales role? What is your background to that sales position and then on to that leadership?
So I guess the background is that I was an account director for the Kesslers business for 6 years. My responsibility was to bring in sales effectively. They sold the business to a big private equity company. They came in and they took the management team out and they installed a new management team. And I guess because I was the highest grossing salesman in the business, almost by default, I was asked to be the sales director. It was a private equity business, and they had a vision for the business over 3 years that we were going to grow from 12 to 30 million. And that was effectively the mantra, take the business forward, grow the business top line, and we'll sort everything else out. And we did that. We did a very, very successful sales growth. We did take the business from 12 to 30. The problem was we weren't making any money. We were actually losing £3 million a year. But that was I was told never to concern myself with that. That was other people's problems. It was sell, competitive environment. And then it all came to a stop. When COVID finished and retail didn't quite come back the same way as it had done prior, this £3 million loss-making business, private equity got bored of it and they walked away, pulled the plug. And I was, all my directors were asked to leave the business. So I was effectively there to collect the debt from my customers for the last couple of years. So I spent 3 years on the board, watching private equity, very senior accountants and lawyers and well-practiced MDs run this business in the boardroom, but without any real executive training, without any real understanding of what we were trying to achieve or why it was the right thing to do. And in hindsight, it wasn't the right thing to do. It was a very short-term goal and ambition that was riddled with issues. And so I always thought like I was the silly one in the room, raising these issues because everyone else sort of had this, was really off the same page. And I guess coming back into the new world, we're going to try and do it the right way. We're going to try and do it with more integrity. We're going to try and grow top line sales, of course, but we're going to concentrate on bottom line profit. We're going to treat our staff better. We're going to treat our suppliers better, and we're going to try and be a more rounded and better business for it.
That's interesting, the way that you were describing that lots of people on the board were very similar in their thoughts and ideas, and you felt like an outlier. And it's something that I read a book by Matthew Said a few years ago, and it talked rebel ideas, and it talked about cognitive diversity, and that actually that having people in the room that all think the same way doesn't help you solve problems, and that actually you need that cognitive diversity to be able to see things from a different perspective, put ideas together in a different way so that you look at solutions in a different way. So what did you really learn about leadership during that point? Because you mentioned that you'd made 180 people redundant, which I can imagine that is really tough emotionally, and going to work every day, that must be a difficult task when you know how much of an impact you're having on other people. So what did you learn through that process about leadership?
I learned that having a job title doesn't make you a good leader.
Yeah.
I learned that you can do things and you can treat people right and still be effective. I learned that honesty and integrity are not words that we should forget or should be words that we dismiss, because there are ways of doing things. And sometimes you have to make tough decisions, and sometimes, you need to change and you need to adapt and you need to be agile. And sometimes there's a fallout with that, and sometimes a redundancy is not the end of the world because it's the right thing for the business. But making tough decisions can be done with respect and with integrity. And I think that's the thing that I came out of it with the number one priority is, as we went into the new world, is that everything we do, I'm going to try and do it for the right reasons. We sat down when I brought my management team back, and I wrote down Rebel Ideas as a book that I need to read, because I brought my management team back. Definitely. And if you sit in my SMT, they all think very differently to me. And there's a lot, we have a job titles off the table hour every week where sometimes we argue, sometimes we bicker, sometimes we're constructive, but we are very, very different in our thinking. And I was really conscious that I didn't know everything. I was going to take this on as an MD, but effectively there were people in the room that had more experience in different areas of the business than me. So yes, I'll take it on my shoulders, but if I don't embrace their ideas, their ideologies, their understanding of their role, then it was never going to work from day one. So it was a real change for me, because coming from being a sales director, you're in a really competitive sales environment. Ego is a really big thing in sales. And actually having to put that on the back burner and I guess understand what, how my actions were being perceived by others, how my behaviors and emotions were driving meetings, became a really important thing for me. So I guess that's the journey that I'm on. I'm certainly not the finished product. I make mistakes every day, but I've got an SMT that will absolutely call me an idiot and tell me that if I'm doing something wrong. And I've become much better at accepting criticism in this new world.
That's amazing. Which leads us very nicely into a conversation about self-awareness, because obviously that transition from sales to managing director has been, as you've described, it's a big transition for an individual. So how would you define self-awareness? So you've talked a little bit about what you've learned about yourself, but if we just talk about self-awareness, how do you define it?
Are you ready for the least erudite answer you've ever had to that question? Because for me, it's the ability to interpret how my behaviors or emotions are affecting the people around me, and then hopefully having the EQ to modify or not modify, if you choose not to the audience to get that outcome that you want.
I love that. So I have a 3-layer model of self-awareness, and it's reflection, recognition, and regulation. And what you've described there is the recognition and the regulation part, and that is a big influence on how you operate. But how do you reflect on your hard skills and your relational skills? Do you do anything specific, or do you reflect every day, or would you call yourself a general reflector? How does reflection manifest for you?
So I have an hour and 10-minute commute to and from work, and I use that time either to listen to wonderful podcasts, and I'm finding this whole new world of podcasting really intriguing because there's some incredible things out there that I think it's really hard to find. You get but speaking to people like yourself, you're finding this really, really interesting. So I do a lot of listening to, and this is a new thing for me. But if I'm not listening to a podcast, I'm reflecting. I'm reflecting on the conversations I've had, and I'm being a little bit self-critical. I'm thinking about how I would do things differently, and often it results in me sitting down and a late night phone call to a member of my team going, "I'm sorry," or "I should have done that better," or "I'm not happy with the conversation we had today and how I responded to you." So.
Wow.
And this is a brand new thing for me. This is, 2 years ago, that would have been me patting myself on the back for landing the sale and, I'm the best thing in the world. So it's this much more humble outlook on work, really, is kind of where I'm at now. But yeah, it's the journey to work. It's that sort of self-monologue. And if I'm going into something new, a new experience as an MD, or a meeting that I know is going to be challenging, I'm practicing. It was previously, everything was natural, everything was off the cuff. But I think there are certain things about my role that I'm not particularly well practiced in. I'm not particularly up to date with, or had those meetings before around, I had a meeting with the council about rates and things like that recently. I practiced that meeting because actually it wouldn't come as naturally to me as it would be if I was going to sell you a retail display. So I've got much more reflective and much more practiced.
How amazing that within that time, and as you said, you hadn't had training, or it's something that you've realized that you need it to help you move forward in your organization and your role. So how do you share that reflective practice across your team? Because you've already said you've got quite a diverse team.
I do.
But how are you getting that sense of reflection, feedback out into your team so that you, I suppose, make it a part of the way you do things in your organization?
Sure. So one of the things when we came back as effectively a new business, and we asked in the end 60 people to come back that had been let down by the previous business, is we stood in front of them and we committed to standing in front of them every month and hearing from them how we're performing. We'll tell you how we're doing as a business. So the redundancies came as a surprise to everybody, and people left just before Christmas, really shocked and disappointed. And we promised to stand up and we would be absolutely honest with you about our performance as a business on a month-to-month basis. We've done 3 engagement surveys now, and we feedback the results. We've got an employee engagement committee, which is chaired by a member of the shop floor staff. We've got some community champions, so people that are in the business that you can go and speak to around, if it's not a HR issue, but you've just got a general gripe, you're something that you want to, if you're not confident, to come and talk to us. We've got an open door policy. So if the door's open, you come and speak to me. And people do. People come and speak to me if there's no toilet roll in the toilets, or they'll come and speak to me about the tea bags have run out, or they'll come and speak to me about genuinely big issues that are affecting them. People who've got financial hardships and how we can help them with that. But it's about listening. It's about not having a one-size-fits-all solution to everyone's challenges, and listening and trying to tailor a bespoke solution, but making sure that, every quarter we close the factory for half a day and we'll go and have ice cream, or we'll go and do a scavenger hunt, or we do something together. So previously the designers didn't know who the shop floor people were. The accountants had never met the truck drivers. And now we have these sort of team events where everyone's mixed in, and we have a much more people orientated business. So last week my accountant went out to watch the football with my account manager. I didn't even know they knew each other, and now they're going to watch Leighton Orient together and have a curry afterwards. And so we're on a journey together where we want to be a embracing, engaged workforce, and we absolutely recognise the importance of it. But listening to some of your other guests, listening to Sophie and people like that, we've got a long way to go. We can do better, but we are absolutely open to doing more.
You talked about putting yourselves forward as a management team on a monthly basis. One of the most difficult things about being self-aware is being open to feedback and being emotionally prepared to receive that feedback. How are you dealing with that vulnerability, that opening yourself up to that feedback?
I think if I'm absolutely honest with you, I'm still getting better at it. I'm still trying to be a better version of myself with it, because a case in point was in November. I stood up in front of the business and we said we're gonna hit budget and we're gonna hit the profitability target for the business this year. Aren't we all amazing? Big round of applause, and kind of expecting this absolute celebration of success from the 100 people we've got in the business.
Mm-hmm.
And the management team and SMT were, of course, happy and excited, and middle management were pleased. But the guy on the shop floor, his first question to me was, "It's a bit cold. Can we turn the heating up?" And my instant reaction was, "That's really disappointing. That's not what I want to hear. I kind of want to, I want the raucous. I want celebration."
Yeah.
I went away, and I think I probably dismissed it a little bit out of hand. And I went away and I reflected on it, and I felt really stupid. I felt, actually, if I'm not meeting the basic needs of my workforce and it's too cold out there, how can I expect them to be excited about the things that don't, the macro things? And I went back and I apologized and I said, "Let's fix it. Let's go and turn the heating up. Let's get you a heater next to your desk to warm you up a bit. What's the bespoke solution for you?" So my instant answer to you is, I need to do better. But I did fix it within 2 hours of making the mistake of dismissing it.
Isn't that interesting? Something that came out with my research was this idea of strategic level disconnect. And it's exactly how you described it. It's that managers come forward with these ideas or big successes, whereas there are people in the organization who just want a heater. And it's that difference between what success looks like for two parts of the organization. And if you have strategic level disconnect from the operational level, then you've got this never the twain shall meet situation. So the fact that you were able to bridge that gap and to go back and have that conversation, that's very interesting to hear that in practice.
Yeah, I want to be the leader that naturally responds how I want to respond. And I think that's the journey that I'm on. I want it to be a bit more ingrained in me that as I take that feedback on, I can adapt and have that self-awareness to respond how I should have done instantly. But I do think the journey that I've been on for the 2 years to go back and do it 2 hours later is certainly better than where I was. So for me, it's about that journey of self-improvement.
Definitely. You've spoken about another one of the podcast episodes that I talked to Sophie Bryan, and we happened to talk about retail. We often talk about retail and how customer supremacy can mean that staff are marginalized. But what is your experience of that organizational culture and where customers fit and where staff fit?
This is a really hard question for me. And I don't think and maybe this is part of my journey, I don't think the question was, what's more important, customers or staff? I don't think I can distinguish between the two.
Okay.
And a case in point was last week. My accounts payable lady, who is a lovely lady, handed her notes in, and she's going to work 8 miles closer to home, an hour's commute less, and she already has a working from home pattern in place. So kind of, and it was all the right reasons, and we wish her all the luck in the world. And I put a job advert out. Within the first 2 hours, I had 28 applicants, perfectly qualified, degrees, all sorts. Now, I'm a serial LinkedIn poster, and the reason I do that is to try and, hopefully at some point, attract some new customers into the business. Mm-hmm. Now, I've been doing that for 6 months, and I've had one. Now, if I was to lose 2 customers, my staff don't get paid. I don't have a job.
Yeah.
So my customers, I want to be a customer-centric business. Now, I absolutely understand and balance that with my employees' welfare, my employees' motivation, and how interesting the work is that they're coming to do, how well they're being remunerated for the work. But there have, for me, and I really, really enjoyed the Sophie Bryan conversation and agreed with probably 95% of everything she said.
Okay.
But I couldn't quite get yet, and maybe this will happen in a year's time, I couldn't quite get to the point where I say, employees are more important than customers, because if I lose 2 employees, it will be incredibly sad. If I lose them for the right reasons, and I could go out to the market and I can find some new wonderful people, I couldn't do that quite the same way with customers. Now, if I was to lose 15 employees, it's very different, and I'd lose my customers because of it. So for me, I cannot distinguish between the two just yet. And I think
Okay.
the lost the lost stakeholder in that is also shareholders as well. And I think shareholders are often seen as the, a bit of a dirty word. They're seen as the London bankers, the fat cats. Whereas actually my shareholders are people that have invested their life savings into what we're trying to do at the business.
Hmm.
They're people that have got their pensions, and they've really taken a big chance on us as a business and what we want to do, and promises that we've made to them in terms of the outputs. So for me, I really try to balance all of my stakeholders equally and make sure that I'm just behaving the way that I said I'd behave at the start of the year, right the way through to the end.
I wonder if part of the reason that you see stakeholders and customers and your members of staff and your people as being equally balanced in your organization is because of the ideas and thoughts and values that you have within your organization. And maybe part of the challenge that people have within retail is that maybe the leaders don't always have that balance. But maybe it's something that we can come back in another 2 years' time and talk about to see what you've discovered as your journey has progressed.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
How does retail, and I appreciate that you are an enabler of retail, but nevertheless you are within that sector and you know the players within that sector. How do you ensure that voices are able to really inform and influence policy and decision making? You've already talked about your monthly meetings with your members of staff who can come and have that conversation with you. But is there anything that you do that you have noticed that is different to other organizations that allows that staff voice to feed up to your senior team?
So I think, in some ways we're very lucky. We're an SME, and I think you can afford to be more bespoke and more tailored in an SME. And I think it must be a lot harder to do that in a large multinational global retailer or brand. So
Hmm.
what we do, if I was, I would never be, but if I was asked to be the managing director of Tesco's, I don't think what we do translates into that large retail environment. I think
Okay.
what we do is good. We've got, we're really happy with our staff retention, but I think retail has got a real challenge on its hands and numerous challenges on its hands. Staff turnover is one of those challenges, but it's always been high in retail, but it's higher than it's ever been. And I think a lot of that's to do with the way we conduct ourselves in stores, the amount of crime, the amount of shoplifting. But it's also a wonderful place to be in that almost all of us have worked in retail at some point in our life, whether we're 16 and it's a Saturday job, or whatever that looks like. Or we certainly know a member of our family that has, because I think it's like 72% of people have had a job in retail. And
Okay.
sometimes people leave retail because they're going off to university or they're retiring, and actually the stats don't look amazing. 50% of people leave their retail job in the first year. But of that 50%, 60% of them are going into other retail jobs.
Hmm.
Retail is at a sort of precipice at the moment post COVID. How do we return to physical stores? What does our experience in store look like? And some retailers are absolutely getting it right, and others are just going to fall by the wayside. And a lot of that is going to be to do with how they treat their staff, how they reward their staff. If you look at someone like John Lewis, their staff retention is 88%.
Wow.
What are they doing that's different to a Tesco's that's infinitely lower? It's not to go in at Tesco; it's a huge organisation, but you go into a John Lewis and you're talking to partners, John Lewis partners, and just that word, I think it creates a sense of meaning within the team. How can you make a difference in a big global retailer? And ultimately, if you're on a hierarchy of needs, for example, making a difference is the thing people want the most. They want to feel like they're valued. That's quite hard to do if you're stacking shelves, but it's not impossible. It just means you need to work harder at it.
Interesting. So, what are your thoughts on people in those different roles? Something that I talk a lot about is leadership at all levels. And you don't have to have leadership within your job title to be a leader and to have people who are followers. Do you find that you have people who are on your shop floor or stacking shelves or who are really at the operational level of the organization and you're seeing leadership traits, leadership qualities? What are your observations?
Oh, absolutely. The best person in a role becomes a manager, and leaders are not interchangeable.
Mm.
Some people come to work because they need to pay their bills, but actually work is work and they have an amazing home life and they can be leaders in their personal life. I've got football coaches, I've got scout leaders, and leadership can look very different to different people. Now, some people don't want the hassle or the issues that comes with managing people, but it doesn't mean they can't add enormous value to your organization. It's just about tapping into them and understanding what gets them up in the morning, what ticks their boxes. And therefore, we're having different forums and different ways of encouraging people to share their experiences and share their knowledge is a really, really powerful thing. And we try really hard at it, and I'm sure we can do better, but we try to have forums and idea meetings where no idea is a bad idea, and we invite different people into it and we brainstorm. And if you don't want to champion your idea, but you want to give your idea, we'll try and implement it for you. We're trying to practice lean manufacturing. We're a manufacturing business. And lean is very rooted in this idea of empowering people and promoting internal ideas. And we try to do it, and I'm sure we could do better, but it's a really powerful thing if you get it right.
When we talk about your members of staff, and you've already mentioned John Lewis and Tesco as another example, that staff retention is positive in some organisations, not so positive in others. What are you seeing generally and within your organisation about the Great Resignation and what people are feeling about their organisation? Are you finding that it's organisation specific, or is it linked to the sector more generally?
I think the numbers would probably say that there's a sector problem, but there are retailers and organisations working within retail that are very capable and are bucking the trend. And I think retail is a industry that touches us all probably more so than any other industry. We all shop. We've either worked in retail or we certainly have been into retail. We haven't all had the same experience of working in a hospitality or automotive, for example.
Yeah.
And there are some incredible success stories. Retail for me is there's no gate. There's very little limitations. If you look at the former CEOs of Sainsbury's and Tesco, and you can go in as a shelf stacker, you can go in as a warehouse operative, and you can become the chief exec or the operation. But you have to work incredibly hard, and you have to stand out from the crowd. And that pathway isn't always as clear as it should be. Some people, because of the sheer volumes of retail and because of the staff turnover, I think there's a bit of apathy around investing in staff, because actually you expect them to leave. And if they're going to leave, then why are we going to invest in training and development? If they've been there for 5 years, 8 years, then maybe we'll start looking at them. And that's probably different to any other industry, because certainly in SMEs, and I've only ever worked in a small SME, we turn over 15 million, Sainsbury's a turnover of 1.5 billion. It's much easier to identify and tailor your rising stars and your top performers into something that's going to be meaningful for them a lot quicker. And I do have sympathy with these big organizations, because they've got metrics to meet and measures to meet. And if they're not performing and they're not meeting their KPIs, they're not going to have a job for very long. And stores do close down. Look at Wilkinson's, for example. I think it's 15,000 people lost their job. Yeah, through no fault of their own. That wasn't anybody on the shop floor's fault. That's management decisions' fault. That's a lack of innovation that's happened in their stores over the last 10 years. Toys R Us going back a few years. If you look at what Toys R Us should have been and look at what Smith Superstores are doing now, through a little bit of innovation, a little bit of staff well-being and staff engagement, Smiths is what Toys R Us should have been. They just lack the energy to innovate and change with the times. And I think that's what leadership is looking at. Taking that strategic view and having the ability to galvanize a workforce to come on a journey with you and get them excited and motivated that they can make a difference. Because ultimately, we all want to make a difference by going to work. But how does the guy in the warehouse make a difference in one warehouse out of 1,000 stores compared to the CEO? It's a challenge, but I think it's a challenge that retail's got to address. And some of them are doing it well. There are people out there bucking the trends, and others will continue to fall by the wayside if they don't get it right.
I'm really loving your ideas about leadership. I don't think everybody in retail has your ideas about leadership.
I think I've had the experience of coming from a bad place, and then we just try and I think sometimes experience bears out the leader, and not everyone has had to go through the 180 redundancies, and we're wounded from that, and we just don't want to do it again. So we have to be better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it changes you when you've lived through being the person who has to do that and the person who has to walk alongside colleagues who are living through that. That makes a huge difference. Adaptability and flexibility really is a big thing for organizations, because I think that the speed of change within the working world is becoming faster and faster. I like what you said about leadership. You have to keep looking, and I've got this phrase that I often use, which is, as leaders we look up and out, and as managers we look down and in, and sometimes within our roles we have to do both. And I think that's exactly what you said, is that you've got to keep your eye on what's coming next. So I'm going to ask you a question, and this is one of these things that I ponder as I walk up and down the high street. What do you think that the new high street, or the high street of the future, is going to look? Because I've got this idea that we like online shopping, we like coffee shops, we like having people delivering our goods on scooters to our houses within 45 minutes. How are we going to put all of that stuff together? And what is that going to mean for our high street? No pressure.
Well, if I can answer that accurately, I might be invited onto some government advisory board and
You might, yeah.
Get an interview in the EU. But for me, I take ever so slight issue with something you said around we like online shopping. I'm not suggesting we don't like online shopping, but we can online shop. We found during COVID and pre-COVID that we never, ever, ever need to set foot in a retail environment again. There is literally nothing you cannot acquire within 2 days from Amazon or alike.
Yeah, but we like tactile. I'm okay. I'm on the journey with you. Yeah.
We like going shopping. As humans, it is a leisure experience now, and it has been for a couple of years. For me, the high street is going to change to something that is much more destination driven. So the big malls, the big shopping centres, they're going to be a point of difference. They're going to be like adult theme parks. Technology is going to be absolutely rife. We're going to have experiences, whether it be with AI or digital screens or personalised shopping experience. We may not choose to buy anything because actually we can get it delivered, and actually carrying shopping bags around for 4 hours, but we have a brand experience. So if you look at what Nike have done in New York, they spent £500 million opening a store where the priority is not selling anything. The priority is having an experience with Nike.
Oh, okay. And that's new.
If you take that sort of the fashion world and the catwalks of Milan filtered down into your Primarks and your River Islands, and for me, retail is going to be much more seamless. So you'll go in there and you may choose to look at a mirror that can augment your new outfit on, and you have it delivered the next day because that's when you need it, and you want to go for a coffee, and carrying a shopping bag is just a burden that you don't need. And the retailers that are getting that right will absolutely thrive, because I went to Westfield 2 days ago and it was full. I could not get a car parking space.
Yeah.
And all of those people were there out of choice rather than necessity.
Okay.
So that's my future. That's my vision.
Oh, I'm liking it, Daniel. I really like that idea that it's a brand experience. And you're absolutely, I've been to the Westfield in Stratford in London and in the East Side. And yes, it's always jam-packed full of people. But there is definitely something that leaders are going to have to be very quick to respond. It's not going to be cheap, because if we want to do anything like Nike has done with its $500 million, that is a significant investment. And if you want to be able to respond quickly, you don't have that much time to save up that kind of money to be able to put that in place. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens on the high street in the future.
Yeah, we're definitely going to lose some names. We've lost some names already, and there'll be a condensing of if it's 500 retailers we've got now, it might be 200 retailers in 20 years' time. But I do think, what else can we do as a family or as a group of friends that compares to retail? We can go to the cinema, or having a face-to-face experience with people in our social circles. I think retail still trumps it. Oxford Street is still Selfridges. Selfridges has become a tourist destination, and
yes,
Harrods. Luxury brands are coming into retail because what retail is seeing is higher average purchase price but less volume.
Oh, okay.
So if you look at people like Prada and Louis Vuitton, they're opening amazingly gorgeous, almost art gallery style retail outlets that are absolutely there for the destination and the brand experience. And Nike is absolutely the precipice, and there'll be a trickle down effect. But even a value retailer like Primark is a very different experience now than it was 10 years ago.
Amazing. I'm really interested, and it's a sector that I know very little about. So that's a really fascinating conversation. Daniel, how can people find out more about you, and how can, if they are looking for jobs, how can they find out what jobs you currently have advertised?
Well, so I mentioned LinkedIn. I am apologetically prolific on LinkedIn. So Daniel Astarita, I love a conversation. I genuinely love talking to people. So add me, follow me, send me a message, and we can talk about anything you want. The jobs, we do have a couple of jobs online at www.kesslers.com. But yeah, always happy to talk to interesting people that have got interesting things to say or can add value. So send me anything you've got and let's have a conversation.
Brilliant. We will make sure that there are links to Daniel's LinkedIn and Kesslers in the show notes so that you can have those random conversations about anything you want to with Daniel on LinkedIn. It's been such an interesting conversation. Thank you very much for joining me. And I think it'll make me think quite differently about the high street as I walk up and down in the future. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
If you're a CEO or senior leader in your organisation, please do get in touch. I'm interested in hearing more from leaders who are on their self-awareness journey and can come and share with us on the podcast the twists, turns, light bulbs and learning that they've experienced on the way. Get in touch with me via LinkedIn or drop me an email on info@knowingself.knowingothers.co.uk. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you for joining me in this episode as we look to develop self-aware leaders around the globe to generate kinder, more respectful and creative working relationships through reflection, recognition and regulation. Join me next week as I talk to my next guest. Looking forward to having you on my learning journey.